Hi, everyone. I am with a good friend that I met years ago at a family life blended event, Danielle Pillans. I got to meet her husband, Brian, and knowing a little bit about their story. They actually invited Gina and I down to their church in Corsicana, and we did a kind of a kickoff Sunday morning service, and she was helping reach blended families. Well, guys, we're going to take it up even one notch. This beautiful little girl that you see sitting next to Danielle is her daughter, Addie. And when Danielle and I were talking recently, she just kind of shared some of her story. And I was just overwhelmed. I think we've got to capture this. My wife Jean has always said we got to reach the kids. Reaching the adults is great, but we got to hit the kids. And I told Daddy, you just, as the Lord leads you, share your story, share your heart, whatever you want to. And so we're going to go there today. So glad you're joining us. And let me first go to Danielle. And so Danielle, do you remember the year? I can't remember dates real well. What year
Oh,
were we
I do not
first
remember the
met?
year, but it's gotta be, gosh, Craig, it's probably been almost 10 years.
I swear. I can't.
Wait,
Yeah, I can. I
I mean, it's
can
gotta be
believe.
pretty close to 10.
Yeah. Yeah. Daniel's got such a heart for people. It's unbelievable. In fact, she introduced Gina and I to her pastor at the time. He's now retired, Rick Lamb. And we did a podcast with Rick. I said, you talk to the pastors. That's your world. That wasn't my world. That's not me. And he was so gracious and humble. The first thing he said was, we want to apologize because sometimes we don't see you in church with your kids and we don't know they may be with the other parent that weekend. And it was just a real great session. So anyway, okay, so it's 10 years ago. Oh my goodness, I can't believe that, but I guess I can. So first of all, tell everybody about you, what you're doing these days, and tell us about your family and just anything you want to share, Danielle, for starters.
Sure. So my husband and I have been married, let's see, for almost 14 years now. And I would say that that conference was probably a huge game changer in our marriage. And I don't know that had Rick not bought into the blended family ministry side of things, that Brian and I would have survived what we're going to get talk a little bit about here in just a little bit with Addie. That kind of set a really firm foundation for blended family and scripture and the way God sees our marriage and our family. And then, of course, meeting you and Gina, that just has spurred us to kind of continue along with that and see how long you guys have been married and how you guys have fought through a lot of the opportunities and challenges that came along the way. But let's see, we have three children together. So Brian had two boys, and they are now our oldest is about to be 21 in April.
Wow.
Our middle son, he is 18. He's a senior this year and graduates in May. And then my daughter, Addie, and so Addie's 14. She's a freshman in high school this year. Um, let's see. So I was in nonprofit ministry for a while. I'm gonna say left ministry, but I'm gonna use that really loosely because a lot of
I
people are like,
understand.
oh, you're leaving ministry? I can't believe you're doing this. But really, ministry just took me in a different position.
Yeah.
So just let's see, it's probably been about 6 years now. I left full-time ministry and became a college professor at our junior college here in Corsicana, Navarro. And that has opened up a whole new world of ministry in our family.
Right. Right.
So now through our church, my husband and I actually run our college ministry, and we primarily work with college athletes, not intentionally. It's just that that's primarily who we have. Last year, we had about 10 to 15 coming consistently. This year, we're anywhere between 25 and 45 every week on Sunday nights at our house. Brian cooks a meal, and the cheer coach, Dustin Velasquez, and we lead the sort of worship and Bible study time. And it's just been really awesome seeing God work. And not only that, but then our kids get to be involved in those students' lives as well. And so they get to see that process. And so we get to serve college kids. I think this week it's spring break. So our baseball team, our softball team, our cheerleading team, our basketball team are all still on campus competing, and the cafeteria is closed. So after tonight, we will have fed over 150 student athletes this week.
Wow.
A meal and spent time with them. And then we still have one more group on Sunday night that will be here as well before classes kick back on Monday and the cafeteria opens again. So ministry's taken me in a different direction.
Yeah.
But it's been really cool and exciting and fun. Yeah, I think that
That's so
kind of catches us up over the last 10 years for the most part until we get
right.
to the big topic here.
That is so cool. Um, we're always in ministry. I mean, the guy that is a janitor that's cleaning, the custodian at your school is
Right.
in ministry. It doesn't mean it has to be a pastor. You teach a Sunday school class. I love to hear how many college kids you're impacting. That's just how cool to have you guys that they can look up to as mentors and leaders, and the gap's not so large that they can relate. It's so good. Just
We
yeah.
have had this school year, since the fall semester, we have baptized 4 students in our courtyard in our
Whoa.
house, and it's so cool to see God work in.
Oh my goodness. God bless you guys.
Yeah,
That is awesome
so
what
fun.
you're doing.
So
What
good.
you're doing. Wow. Neat, neat, neat. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
All right. Tell us about your beautiful daughter, Addie. And wait, there is one thing I forgot. What was one takeaway? I'm gonna put a plug in for Family Life Blended and our
Yeah,
mutual friend Ron Deal. When you and Brian were there, when again 10 years ago, and
sure.
what was just a takeaway that maybe could help any blended family that might be listening to this, like we're pulling our hair out, or what was a takeaway that helped for you guys from that event?
I think that just off the top of my head, one of the biggest takeaways I took was that each one of our family members cooks differently and at different times.
Yes,
And so just because Brian and I may have felt good or may not have, one or the other of us in that relationship, our children may be in a different spot.
so good.
And so he's talking about the crock pot, I believe, is what
Yeah,
he's talking about,
yeah,
and how the vegetables cooked at different times. And, the potatoes are going to take longer than the peas.
yeah,
So each one of us took different time, but the reality was it takes, I believe they said 7 years for
yeah.
a family to
That's
actually
right.
really blend. And so I think that that was really eye-opening for us, and that we had to step back and allow it to be on each of the children's terms, versus Brian and I trying to push that on them and how
That's
that
a
works
great
in our
point.
marriage.
That's a
So
great point. That's
yeah.
I know how you feel because that was one of Gina's and my takeaways. I thought we could kind of come in and put everybody together and we're going to live
Oh,
happily
sure.
ever after,
Yeah.
and off we go. And I'm like, this is not what's going on.
Yeah.
Oh, it's going to take longer. Oh, okay. Light bulb, ding ding. Okay, got it. Thanks for
Right.
sharing that. All right. Introduce Addie to us, and Addie, I'll let you just kind of share your story and anything you want to go. So thanks again for being with mom and doing this.
Do you want me to start it? You don't know how to introduce myself. Okay, I'm gonna kick us off.
You
Um,
bet.
so 7 years ago in February, Addison's one of her really good friends was killed in a murder suicide by her father.
Mm,
Um, so she's 7. Um, B, we're already in a blended family, right? And so processing grief from a 7-year-old's perspective was very challenging, as well as from a blended family perspective, because if the biological, now at the time she didn't understand this, I don't believe, but at the time, how could she trust my husband Brian when this little girl's dad would do that to her?
yeah,
And so we went through a lot of challenges with that. Addie was really close with my dad. Addie has a really good relationship with her biological father. And then you had Brian. So we had 3 really strong male influences in her life that she really built some walls and had reservations and hesitations with. So Brian and I specifically was a huge wedge even in our marriage. But for Addie specifically, like when her biological dad, he lived out of state, so he would come to town to visit. She would hang out with him during the day, but when it came time for bed, she wanted to come home. And so he was so good with her. He would bring her back to our house. He would get her ready for bed. He would put her in bed. He would, leave for the night. He would be back on the couch that next morning waiting on her to wake up. And then he would take her for the day and hang out. And again, Brian was super good with that as well, and understanding of, yeah, okay,
Right.
it may not be normal that her dad is hanging out at our house, but this is what Addie needs at the moment. And so I'm going to let him drink my coffee and I'm going to let him hang out on my couch because
Right.
Addie needs her dad. And so that part of it. But as far as like the building a wedge between us, like Addie didn't understand that. She's 7,
Sure.
but it made a huge impact on our family. And then our boys were still fairly young, but they were old enough to also realize, hang on, she's getting different treatment than we are. Why does she get to do this? Or why doesn't she have to do that? Or why do
Right.
I need to clean my room, but she doesn't have to clean her room? And all of these different opportunities and challenges. Sorry, our dog has now come into the picture.
That's
All
fun.
of these opportunities and challenges that are presented, but we spent a lot of time with a Christian counselor, with Addie doing play therapy. Brian and I spent some time in some counseling with that therapist as well. And one of the things that we were told was she feels like she has no control. Her whole world is spinning out of control. So you have to give her moments where she has the control. And so cleaning your bedroom, she didn't want to clean her room. That
Right.
was something we could allow her to have. But the boys,
Yeah.
okay, you have to clean your room. And
Right.
so it was really challenging for them to understand, and in a blended family, why certain people got different
Yeah.
got different treatment, I would say, than
Right.
the
Right.
but through that, we were introduced to a camp called Camp Agape, and
Yep.
it is a bereavement camp here in Texas. And every summer they bring children in. They have adult buddies. They have LPCs on staff that work with the kids. They do different activities and games that really just minister to the kids' heart and healing through scripture. And so we
So
sent
good.
Addie to camp, and I'll let Addie talk about camp here in a minute. But we sent
Um,
Addie to camp. I really picked up a different child than what I
wow.
dropped off, which was really an answer to prayer. This was about this was a year and a half after Mackenzie had died, that we sent her to camp. And so then our family that fall got to go to their family camp. And that was a huge shift in our family. Our boys went, we talked about not taking the boys. We had conversations with the boys. They finally agreed that they would like to go. So we all went as a family of 5. And that was a huge game changer because our boys finally understood, hey, this is what Addie's dealing with. This is the hurt that she's struggling with. This is why mom and dad are allowing her to not clean her room, or this is why
Right.
we have to do this and she gets to do that. And so it was like from that moment on, the boys finally saw the difference and they started treating Addie differently. They finally understood mine and Brian's perspective on things when they finally got to walk through some of that. And so Camp Agape was that finally melting moment for all of
That's
us
right.
to kind of come back together. But I'm going to let Addie jump in. I will tell you that first year and a half was so isolating.
Wow.
It felt
Yeah.
like no one else knew
I,
that.
yeah, that I can only imagine that, of course, that would be natural.
Yeah. So
I
there weren't resources out there.
know.
It felt like every Google search I did brought up
Yep.
nothing that was relevant to what we were walking through. How do you tell your 7-year-old that her best friend was murdered by her father? It was just gut wrenching. So there's just a lot of things that kind of build around that. So
Yeah. Yeah. Addie, let me ask you two or three uh, questions. There'll be simple questions, but they're going to be very difficult answers. It's been my experience and many, many others that when trauma hits, we kind of go one or two ways. When I had trauma, I ran away from God. When my wife hit trauma, she ran to God and said, I can't get through this without you. As a little 7-year-old girl, just the question, did you go from God, or when that happened, did you start running to him?
Well, I don't really remember much of it, but I was still like really young and like didn't really like know much about that at the time. And so I think I was just kind of like stuck in the middle of like I don't know what to do and like
Yeah.
also didn't like know all the things that like God has done and like how he could help me.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks. Makes sense. Tell us about Camp Agape. Sounds like it was unbelievable. Would love to hear your story. Tell us about it.
Okay, well, I do remember some of it. um, so let's see. I definitely remember the activity that I most enjoyed. It was like this yarn, and like I can't remember what the reason was, but like this different yarn would go like back and forth, and it would like get all tangled. And I can't really remember like how that like got to our feelings or something, but I remember that was like the activity I enjoyed the most. Um,
it helps you. So the reason that they do that is to connect you with other people and realize that you're not the only one who is
Makes
grieving,
sense.
and that you're not the only one in a situation like your own.
Yeah.
Volcano one?
mhm.
The colors? No. Okay.
I also remember we had pictures. They made pictures of like feelings, and that we would color them. And we had like our own little binder, and like they would explain like how these feelings work and like what it does, I guess.
Right. Right. Wow. Um, so many times, Daniel, when Satan's such a good liar and deceiver, we do feel like we're alone. We're
Mm-hmm.
Nobody knows, and nobody knows what I'm dealing with, and nobody's gone through this other than me. And I can only imagine what that. You'd mentioned you picked up from camp a little girl that was different than when you took her. Um, what what happened? What changed? What was the light bulb moment that maybe you know impacted you, Addie?
Oh,
And maybe that's a better question for mom because she was using
yeah,
that
I
terminology.
mean,
You share,
Seven's
yeah,
young, right? Seven's super young. So there's a lot of things even uh,
yeah,
that Addie and I over the last, I think it's like the last year to 2 years, we started to have more conversations and dialogue about
yeah,
things.
right,
And as we do, the way Addie remembers things isn't
very little.
one, she remembers
uh,
very, very small portions of it, but two, sometimes they're not necessarily accurate of what was actually happening. An
right,
example is for Mackenzie's funeral, I did not allow Addie to go, and that was my choice.
okay,
Addie and I went to the funeral home earlier in the day, and I allowed her to go in and to do her process of walking through and seeing the pictures and all of the things. The two of us went and did that. But then we went home before her grandmother came and the family and friends and things for the service. But about a year ago,
Well, I remember you told me that I couldn't go to the funeral.
yeah,
I
about a
don't
year
remember why.
ago, she said, well, I thought, she called her grandmother Banana. She said, well, I thought Banana wouldn't let me come to the funeral. And I said, oh, no, that was not Banana's decision. It wasn't that she didn't want you there. It was me and that was my choice as a mom to protect you from that because I knew it was going to be an extremely difficult
yeah,
service. I said, so I chose that for you. And I thought that that was the best choice at the moment. I said, it wasn't Banana. And so all these years, then I thought, oh my goodness, all these years she's held this, thought in her brain that the banana was the reason she couldn't go, and the reality was no, it was me being a mom and trying to protect you
Yeah.
from those things.
Yeah.
But as far as the difference in her before Camp Agape, she wouldn't spend time with really my dad, with Brian, with her dad. She wouldn't spend a whole lot of alone time with them. It became very uncomfortable for her. She didn't want to be with either one of them. She stopped all of the activities that she was in before. The two of them played piano together. They were duet partners and supposed to be competing 2 weeks after. There was three of them in a trio in the group, but they were going to be playing and competing together like 3 weeks after this had happened.
Wow.
And so she stopped playing the piano. She wouldn't touch the piano again. She would cry when we would go to church. You asked that question earlier. Did she run away, or did she would cry. She didn't want to go to church. She didn't want to go there. She didn't want to be a part of it. She didn't want to see the people. She was cheering at a cheer gym. She quit going to that cheer gym. She didn't want any part of any of those things. So literally over these last 7 years, everything in our life has changed. We attend a different church. She started cheering at a different location. We sold our home and we've moved to a different house.
Right.
It was like, despite her really understanding that, it was like everything she was cutting off, and we had to make that shift with her and change for our family and for her, because there were just so many memories in each of those places and each of those activities and things that she didn't do well with. But she would lay, for example, she would come home in the afternoons from school and lay in the floor in fetal position in our kitchen and just cry. She wouldn't talk to anybody. She wouldn't communicate with anyone. She didn't want to talk about Mackenzie. She didn't want to talk about her dying. She didn't want to talk about her day at school, which, come to find out, was really challenging, and she struggled through because some of the kids were actually very tacky to her. And would say things like, well, Mackenzie wasn't your friend anyway. She didn't love you. She didn't like you. And so for a long time, Addie wouldn't talk about those things. She kind of bottled everything and kept it in. And then even going to her Christian counselor, he did play therapy with her.
Talk to him.
She wouldn't talk to him. She just told
talk to him.
I would not talk to
in
him.
the sandbox.
Okay.
She said, all I did is play in the sandbox. I don't want to talk to him. I don't want to tell him what I feel. I don't want to do anything. And he just he let her, because that's his job was. But Camp Agape brought the ability for her to name her emotions.
Wow.
And she still didn't really want to talk about them, but she could at least tell you what they were. And so she also, one of the things I remember when I picked her up, she said, Mom, we did this activity with a water bottle and we put colors in it that were all of our emotions, and it made it really dirty and nasty. And then we put this stuff in it and it exploded everywhere. And they told us that if we bottle in all of our dirty, yucky emotions, then eventually we're going to explode and spew it on everybody. And she's like, so I need to be better. And so it was like, yes, she said that.
Wow.
So I was like, this is like a huge light bulb moment. And so even though she still wouldn't really talk about Mackenzie or still really talk about those things, it taught her how to name emotions better.
Yeah.
And once that happened, there started to be this healing process in relationships. Yeah.
Addie, I'm so honored that you'd want to be on a camera and sit with your mom and share this. We could talk longer, but let me wrap up a couple of things. How old are you now? That happened when how old are you today?
Well, right now I'm 14.
14. Okay. And your mom was telling me about something that God's kind of put on your heart to do and maybe to share and can help others. And tell us kind of what that is, and if you would, just real fast.
Oh, well, I'm starting my own nonprofit called Butterfly Hearts, and I make little gift bags, and we're working on making boxes and stuff. That way I can give them to children who are grieving, like in the same position I was, and I'll give them to funeral homes and like elementary schools, and sometimes I'll even give them to family members or give them to the children, and I think it provides some sort of comfort because even though they're like not feeling great at that moment, they could still get a little smile out of it.
You are one of the finest young ladies I've ever met. Um, I am just blown away how a beautiful little girl who experienced something that's just the most traumatic thing that I could even think could happen at 7, now at 14 is what God has put on your heart and what you're doing. Well, we want to help. We want to, I want you and your mom to tell us how we could help you. And we want to take this recording and send it out to all of our friends. And we want to list on there how they can get in touch with you guys because you, young lady, are making a difference. And you're the ones that give me hope. Because can I see some of the adults in the world, I can kind of get discouraged today with what's going on. But when I hear what you're doing with that, I'm just blown away. And I thank you for sharing your story. I can't thank you enough. We'll keep you posted when we send this out. But Danielle, if you can give us whatever website, contact info, need, whatever we want it to go out. And I look forward to talking with you guys again soon about this. So thank you for sharing. Danielle, thank you so much.
Thank you for having us, Craig.
All right.